On the evening of Friday, the 25th of January 2013, Detective Garda Adrian Donoghue and his colleague Joseph Ryan arrived in this car park here, the car park of the Lordship Credit Union in the Cooley Peninsula in County Louth. They were here to collect money and escort that money back to the bank in Dundalk. Now, literally within minutes of arriving here, the two Gardaí were ambushed by 4 armed robbers, and Detective Garda Adrian Donoghue was shot dead without mercy. In this special report for Independent.ie to mark the first anniversary of this outrage, we examine the effect this crime has had on the community and on the men and women of An Garda Síochána. We also focus on the gang suspected of carrying out the crime and examine the progress so far of the Garda investigation 1 year on.
Adrian was probably one of the finest policemen I've ever known, and I spent 27 years in An Garda Síochána. Adrian was a detective in Dundalk, as we know. He lived in Lordship on the Cooley Peninsula. He played football with St Patrick's GAA club on the Cooley Peninsula also. He was a very, very professional policeman. He was highly respected in his area. He gave of his time and services to the local GAA club and other organisations on the Cooley Peninsula. He was married with 2 children, and he was immersed in the community in Dundalk and the Cooley Peninsula and in Lordship. Everybody knew him. He spent a lot of his time looking after the school children on the Cooley Peninsula and coaching them playing football. And in actual fact, it was ironic when Adrian was murdered that one of the photographs that appeared in one of the national papers was a photograph of him surrounded by young children. And unfortunately, he was murdered a very, very short distance in the background of that photograph.
Adrian, as you know, at this stage it's well publicised, has been a great friend to a great many people. To his peers, he was someone that was revered, very well respected. In terms of the business community in Dundalk, fantastic guy. They have tremendous respect for him. His colleagues and his neighbours out in the Cooley Peninsula, where he played Gaelic football, pillar of the community in every sense of the word.
So when you see this big lad called Adrian Donoghue, who was about 6'4", 6'5", he was about 17 stone, a big heavy built lad, but fit lad. He was an ideal midfielder. This guy was, when he was born, he was number 8 or number 9 in his back. Adrian was always the quiet man that was there for training. Always found it harder than the rest because of his size. He was a big man, big gentleman, and. But he was always a fellow that you could stand and have a chat to.
So when Adrian was murdered, it really was a huge attack on every single member of the force in the division, whether they knew Adrian or not. It had a huge impact on not just the members of the Guards, but on their families, on the communities, because he had, as I said, immersed himself so deeply into the community on the Cooley Peninsula and indeed around Dundalk. And he was a very highly regarded and highly respected member of the force.
At 9:30 p.m, Adrian Donoghue and his partner arrived in Lordship Car Park to escort the credit union officials. But as they were about to drive out in convoy, a car suddenly blocked their exit. Now, the Garda patrol car comes to a stop somewhere around here in the car park. Detective Garda Adrian Donoghue gets out of the passenger seat to investigate what's going on in front of him here at the entrance to the car park. Now, CCTV footage from the credit union then picks up 4 men who suddenly appear and come across that wall there and come running towards the police car and the 2 credit union officials' cars. As they do so, they split up. 2 of the men run towards the car driven by an official from Lordship Credit Union. That official is robbed of €4,000. The other 2 men, as they get to this the island in the middle of the car park, one of them is seen to be carrying a long-barreled shotgun. The CCTV suggests that he lifts the weapon into an aim and he fires 1 shot. That shot hit Detective Garda Adrian Donoghue in the side of the back of the head, and he died. By the time Adrian Donoghue was being laid to rest, his colleagues had identified the 5-member gang responsible for the outrage. They were a group of well-known criminals, all aged in their 20s, who live in and around Crossmidlen in South Armagh. They had been responsible for a crime spree of robbery and violence along the border, using the region's network of back roads and exploiting the fact that the PSNI cannot freely patrol its northern side, where the criminals are being protected from justice.
The Boreens and the Drumlins of South Armagh are deceptively peaceful. But during the Troubles, the Provisional IRA turned this pastoral landscape into a killing field. Here the rule of law was replaced by the iron rule of the IRA Army Council. Thus it earned the name Bandit Country.
This is where the whole culture of omerta, as you called it, Paul, goes on. People are very, very afraid to talk. They're very isolated. It's probably like nowhere else that you can find in this country. You have a culture of silence within this area. You have people who are afraid to come out and talk, people who are afraid to help the authorities solve a lot of the crime that has gone on over here in this area over the troubled times.
The naked reality here is there are people shielding these killers. People at this very moment are shielding killers. They have the knowledge. We're appealing to those people to come forward and help us. One way or the other, we intend to get to the bottom of this. We have identified the people involved, and we will continue to compile the evidence that's necessary to bring about a successful conclusion. But you know, it seems to me that society on both sides of the border has a choice to make here in terms of what type of society they wish to live in. And people that have that type of knowledge really need to think of their colleagues, think of their neighbours, think of their friends, and think about the society that they want to live in. And, you know, I'm appealing to those people to come forward and help us with this investigation. But as I said, one way or the other, we will continue to bring this matter to a successful conclusion.
One local family seeking justice for their murdered son probably know more than most how difficult it is to break through the indifferent silence that pervades Crossmidlen and its hinterland. In October 2007, a young man called Paul Quinn from Cullyhanna, just down the road here in South Armagh, was lured to this disused cowshed just inside County Monaghan. Now, when he got here, at least 10 men were waiting for him, and they'd come prepared for murder. Each man wore disposable overalls and surgical gloves. They were also armed with iron bars and pickaxe handles studded with nails. They jumped on Paul Quinn and began to beat him. Over the next half hour, they quite literally beat the young man to a pulp. And a few hours later, he died as a result of his injuries. Every bone in his body had been broken. Now, the suspects responsible for this outrage are all from South Armagh, and they're all closely connected to both the Provisional IRA and Sinn Féin. What makes this case chillingly similar to the case of Adrian Donoghue is that the perpetrators are being protected behind a veil of silence, the Code of Omerta.
Our son was murdered because he fought with a couple of people from not too far away from here that wasn't involved with the IRA. And he beat a couple of them, and just they couldn't take that. They had to retaliate and get a gang to beat him. And they beat him to the death. That was for something as simple as that. Well, we believe that it was members of the IRA or associates of the IRA, associates of these people in the IRA and some of them IRA. We honestly believe that. And all the people that's involved in this, near enough them all seem to live in the northern side of the border, and the yards can't come in. And along with that, there's all silence about here. People won't talk because they're afraid to talk. Because down through the years of all the trouble, you daren't open your mouth or say anything or you would be dealt with. And the people still in the same frame of mind are still afraid of these people because these people are still intimidating everyone.
Our hearts go out to Caroline Donoghue and her family. It was a terrible, terrible thing to do. And whoever done it, like us, she needs to get justice too. People need to come out and speak out and support her, and we know she's looking for justice just like us. But round here you just don't talk.
You know, when you talk about the nature of the area, as you spoke about this Omerta, you only have to look at the case of Paul Quinn and his abduction and murder. And it is widely recognised by the police forces that was investigating that, and indeed outside bodies that investigated that Sinn Féin and the Provisional IRA were involved in that murder. And whether they want to accept it or not, the facts remain that they were involved in it. They know the murderers of Adrian O'Donoghue. And, you know, to have this veil of secrecy and to not come forward and help with the investigation is hypocrisy of the highest order by Sinn Féin and the members of the IRA that know the murderers of Detective Garda Adrian Donoghue.
It is now 1 year since this brave police officer was murdered serving his country. And as he is remembered, the question in everybody's mind is, will his killers ever be brought to justice?
Our commitment has never demurred. We're as committed today as we were on that fateful night. And that commitment will continue for as long as it's necessary to bring these people to justice.
There are so many people that know so much about this particular murder. It would be impossible for them not to escape conviction. I've absolutely no doubt. Whether it takes another 12 months or it takes another 2 years, it will reach a final conclusion. And the conclusion will be that these people will be brought before the courts. I've absolutely no doubt about that.
We can't have people on this island who believe that they can freely go out, murder innocent people, and that there's no consequences. It's very important there are consequences. It's very important that justice is done for the sake of the late Adrian Donoghue's family, his colleagues, and the wider community. And on behalf of the government, I would endorse what I know is the view of the Commissioner, that no stone will be left unturned, nothing will be left undone that can be done until the people responsible are brought before our courts.
One way or the other, we intend to get to the bottom of this. We have identified the people involved, and we will continue to compile the evidence that's necessary to bring about a successful conclusion. But, you know, it seems to me that society on both sides of the border has a choice to make here in terms of what type of society they wish to live in. And people that have that type of knowledge really need to think of their colleagues, think of their neighbours, think of their friends, and think about the society that they want to live in. And, you know, I'm appealing to those people to come forward and help us with this investigation. But as I said, one way or the other, we will continue to bring this matter to a successful conclusion.
There is a real determination on the behalf of everybody involved in this investigation to bring it to a successful conclusion. They want to honour the memory of their colleague Adrian Donoghue, a father, a husband, a son, a brother. I'm Paul Williams, and this has been a special report for Independent.ie.